The Threshold Accord had stood for 11,000 years. It was the oldest treaty in the galaxy, older than the Kryvan Ascendancy, older than the Silent Choir of Thren, older than the light now reaching some of the youngest stars in the spiral arm. It named, in cold administrative language, the boundaries of known space. Every civilized species had signed it. Every species had contributed a chapter to the great archive of peoples, a living record of who had risen, who had fallen, and who still walked among the stars. Humanity had no chapter. Humanity had a footnote. Homo sapiens, extinct, presumed self-destroyed, circa their own 21st century. No confirmed contact, referenced only in fragmentary transmissions and corrupted data drift, believed to be cultural myth propagated by lesser species seeking a boogeyman for their own fears. See the Devil Star Legends. On the research station Velker's Patience, orbiting a dead world at the edge of what the old charts called the Soul Exclusion Zone, archivist Doran Vex found that footnote almost charming. "They tell children stories about them," Vex said to his assistant, a young Threnic scholar named Io, her 4 eyes blinking in the dim light of the observation deck. "Monsters who commit fire to their own atmosphere, who wage war against their own kind for sport, who supposedly built weapons that could unmake a star." He chuckled, a dry rattling sound. "Charming nonsense. Every species needs a demon to frighten itself with." "But the transmissions," Io said carefully, "the old distress signals, they're catalogued as authentic." "Static," Vex said. "Cosmic noise our ancestors mistook for language. There is no species called human. There never was." He was still saying this when the alarms began to scream. Space, at the edge of the exclusion zone, does not announce itself. There was no flash, no gathering storm of gravitic distortion, no polite hail requesting passage. There was only absence. A patch of starlight simply stopping, as though something vast had drawn a curtain across the universe. And then the ship was there. It was not beautiful. The Kryvan built beauty into their war hulls, gilded spires meant to be admired even as they burned. The Thren built elegance, curves like poetry. This ship had none of that. It was a slab of dull gray armor the size of a small moon, scarred with the pockmarks of battles no living species had witnessed, and along its flank, in letters too plain to be anything but a name and not a boast, was written, UNSC Patient Fury. "That is not possible," Vex whispered, staring at the readouts. "That hull configuration doesn't match anything in the registry." "Sir," Io said, voice tight, "it's not asking to match anything. It's hailing us." The voice that came through the comm was low, unhurried, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. "This is Fleet Commander Elena Reyes, United Nations Colonial Defense Force, Vessel Patient Fury. You are inside a boundary our species marked as ours 11,000 years ago. We didn't come to start anything. We came to see who forgot." Panic moved through the station like a living thing. Junior officers scrambled for defense grids that had not been tested in 3 centuries. Diplomatic staff argued over which treaty clause applied to a species that, according to every record, did not exist. Vex found himself gripping the edge of his console, staring at the footnote he had read 1,000 times, now feeling, for the first time, entirely inadequate. "Hail them back," Vex ordered. Ask what they want." The reply, when Reyes answered, was almost weary. "We want what we've always wanted, to be left alone. We drew a line 11,000 years ago after the lost thing that came looking for us learned why humans don't get invaded twice. You built an archive of peoples. You wrote us down as folklore. That's fine. We didn't come here for a chapter. We came because your survey drones crossed the line 4 times this cycle. That's a warning, not an invitation." Vex's hands trembled over the console. "For drones, scientific vessels, unarmed. We meant no." "I know," Reyes said, and something in her voice shifted. Not softer exactly, but human in a way none of them had a word for. "That's why you're getting a warning instead of a debris field." What happened next was not a battle. It was worse in its way because it was mercy, and mercy from something that powerful is its own kind of terror. The Patient Fury did not fire. It simply moved, A single unhurried maneuver that placed its full profile between the station and the dead world's crumbling ring debris, which Vex's own sensors now showed had been on a slow collision course with Velker's patience for the past 6 months. An old orbital hazard nobody on the station had bothered to track. "Your station's been drifting into a debris field for half a year," Reyes said, almost offhand. "Nobody flagged it. We flagged it. You're welcome." Then, quieter. "We remember what it's like to be the small ones. A long time ago, someone bigger could have wiped us out and didn't bother to warn us first. We don't do that. Not to anyone. Not even people who wrote us off as ghost stories." Io, standing beside Vex, found she could no longer speak. In her hands she held a data slate open to the archive's entry on humanity. Extinct, presumed self-destroyed, and she felt, for the first time in her scholarly life, the particular shame of having been wrong in print. "Why," Vex finally managed, "would you save the descendants of the people who forgot you existed?" There was a long pause before Reyes answered, and when she did, her voice carried something that traveled easily across the gulf of stars and species alike. Not pride, not superiority, something gentler and far harder to name. "Because that's not really a question for us, archivist. Ask yourselves why you'd need a reason to save someone. We didn't." The patient fury held position only long enough to nudge the debris field onto a safer trajectory, a task that would have taken the station's own engineers 3 years and a fleet of tugs. And then, without ceremony, without demand for tribute or apology or recognition, it turned and dimmed back into the dark from which it came. It left no threat behind. Only a silence that felt, for the first time in 11,000 years, deliberately kind. Vex sat alone on the observation deck long after the ship was gone, the footnote still glowing on his console. Slowly, with hands that no longer quite trusted themselves, he began to type a new entry into the archive of peoples. Not a correction, but a confession. Humanity, not extinct, not myth, species status, watching over us longer than we knew, asking nothing in return. He paused, then added one more line, the truest thing he had learned that day. "We called them folklore because we could not imagine kindness that vast, or that quiet. And for the first time the galaxy understood what it truly meant to be human."